Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Drinks and Dragons. Time to transform into the Dungeon Master. Thank you for joining this video. We're going to be talking about combat. I'm going to do a whole series of videos on sort of very short demonstrations for all of those folks who maybe don't have access to the Player's Handbook or find that type of information consumption intimidating. This is going to be a quick demonstration for how combat works. I'm going to pack a bunch in. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoy it. For those who are interested, combat is in the Player's Handbook in Chapter 9, and feel free to kind of at your leisure read through that, but you don't have to start the game. I'm getting ready to demonstrate what a round of combat actually looks like. All right, so I'm playing the role of the Dungeon Master as well as all of the player characters. And so what I do as the Dungeon Master, first of all, is set the stage for the combat. The players round a corner and they find themselves face to face with a hill giant, just a snarling, smelly beast. And then I tell everybody, roll initiative. So roll initiative. So what is initiative? Let's get that one out of the way. Everybody takes their 20-sided dice, including the Dungeon Master, who will be rolling for the monsters or whatever creature that the players are going to be encountering. They get that roll, and they take that number, in this case it was an 11 for the monsters, and they add the initiative modifier to that. It's the same thing as your dexterity modifier, so +1, +2, maybe -1, depends on what your dexterity is. You add or subtract that from this roll, and then the Dungeon Master will take the highest roll to the lowest roll, and that's the order of turns that everybody takes in the combat round. All right, now that we know who's going when, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the player sheet and the monster stat blocks. That's going to tell us what can happen in an individual interaction. Okay, for player sheets, you're going to be looking at your armor class. Pay attention to that. You're going to be looking at your hit points, and you're also going to be looking at what your attack options are. These are weapon attacks, but if you're a spell caster, a cleric, a wizard, a bard, etc., you're going to have options in here for casting spells as well. So all of those things are going to matter when you're entering into combat. And for the Dungeon Master, these guys are stat blocks, and they go with the monster. And these stat blocks could go with every monster. And again, so the Dungeon Master is looking at what's the armor class, what are the hit points of this creature, what are the actions that it can do, what are its attacks. And each stat block will have all of those there. And the Dungeon Master will have that in front of them, and the players will have their player sheets in front of them when the combat rounds begin. All right, here it goes. It's going to go like this. Harlan, your action. Harlan says, I'm going to attack the hill dwarf with my greatsword. Harlan's going to roll a d20. That's a 14. 14 plus the greatsword is +4, so that's 18. Does an 18 hit, Dungeon Master? The armor class of the hill giant is a 13, so yes, an 18 does hit. All right, roll damage. It's 2d6 plus 2. So Harlan will roll 2d6. 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 2 is 8. And so the Dungeon Master will say, okay, that was 8 points. So Harlan did 8 points of slashing damage. I'll subtract 8 from 105. Or if I happen to have rolled 10d12 plus 40, whatever that hit point number is, I will subtract Harlan's damage from those hit points. And then next, Taz will do the same thing with his or her attack options or spell options. Then the monster's turn, then the Dungeon Master will roll for the monster. So let's say the monster's angry with Harlan for hitting him with the greatsword, so the monster's going to attack Harlan. I will roll as the Dungeon Master a d20. So that's a 9, but this guy with his multi-attack has +8, so 17. So Harlan, does a 17 hit? 17 is greater than 14. It definitely hits. And so I'll go to the Great Club damage.
That's a +8 to hit. 3d8 plus 5. I probably just annihilated Harlan with only 12 little tiny hit points. But anyway, that's what would happen. The monster goes, let's just say Harlan has far more hit points than that. The monster ends his turn. Then Gimner goes and does the same thing with his or her attacks or spells. Elisar the same thing with his or her attacks or spells. And then he goes all the way back to the beginning for Harlan, Taz, Monster, Gimner, Elisar. And it keeps cycling through those rounds, those turns rather, of combat. Each sequence completes a round of combat, each turn. And then the round of combat is kind of what you dungeon masters keep track of to determine things like, how long an effect would stay in place, if it's so many rounds, etc. So I don't want to get into too many details on that, but that's basically combat at a very high level. Player sheet, stat block, and a lot of dice rolling. And there's different ways to keep track. I hope that explains kind of the basic mechanics, though.
And so, I also will set it up where it makes sense. If the hill giant is in melee range with the players, those are the people that are the characters that it will be attacking with the club. It's not going to attack somebody 40 yards away with a club, if that makes sense. So, and sometimes you can set up your minis for combat. Sometimes it's all theater of the mind. Whatever the situation kind of calls for and whatever your table likes to do, that's what you should do. All right, that's combat in a very small nutshell. I hope that explains it and gives you a demonstration sort of how it works mechanically. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click like on the video itself. And there's also a little bell icon at the top that you can ring that will notify you when I post new videos. All right, thanks. We'll see you next time. This is Ryan from Drinks and Dragons signing off.